I wasn't supposed to be at the cafe that morning. I'd told myself I'd stop coming here so often that it made me look like I didn't have anywhere else to be. Which wasn't untrue. But habits have gravity, and mine pulled me right back to the small table near the window, the one with the wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix with a folded napkin. She was already there behind the counter. Mira. Mid-40s, hair pulled back in that quiet, almost careless way that made her look like she'd been somewhere else a moment ago, thinking about something heavier than coffee orders. She wasn't the owner, just picked up morning shifts because, as she once said with a shrug, "It's good to have a reason to wake up." I smiled at that longer than I should have. I tried not to glance at her while I waited in line, but the eye does what it wants. She was wiping down the espresso machine, slow, small circles like she was keeping herself anchored to the moment. Her fingers looked tired. Capable. I looked away too late. She caught me. A blink from her. A soft, almost smile. Nothing dramatic, but something in it made my chest tighten in that uncomfortable, familiar way. When it was my turn, she didn't ask what I wanted. "Medium latte, 1 pump vanilla," she said before I opened my mouth. Her voice was quiet, a little husky from the morning. "Rough night?" I exhaled a laugh. "Is it that obvious?" Her eyes lifted, warm, but observant in a way that made people tell her things they didn't plan to. "You've got that thinking too much look today. I always look like that." "That's true," she said softly, and the corner of her mouth curved like she hadn't meant to smile but couldn't stop it. She moved to the machine, and I watched the way she tucked a short strand of hair behind her ear. A tiny gesture. Nothing flirtatious. Just human, honest, and more intimate than anything I'd had in months. I slipped my phone out of my pocket. No new notifications. Just the unsent messages sitting in drafts, half thoughts, half goodbyes. I closed the screen quickly, like she could somehow see the loneliness in the brightness. When she handed me the cup, her fingers brushed mine. Accidentally? Probably. But heat bloomed in the small space between us anyway. "Did you ever fix that table?" she asked, nodding toward my spot. "No. I think it's part of the charm now. You say that about everything you're too lazy to fix." She said it lightly, teasing, but her eyes softened after, like she worried she'd said too much. "I'll fix it today," I murmured. She raised a brow. "You won't?" We both smiled. Not long, but long enough for something to settle, or shift, in the air between us. I sat at my usual seat. The table still wobbled. I folded a napkin and slid it under the leg, pressing until it steadied. I didn't know why it mattered so much suddenly. Maybe because she'd noticed. Through the window, the morning moved slow. People passing. Cars stopping. A world that didn't care what I was feeling, which was somehow comforting. I looked at my cup. She'd written my name. She always did. But today, there was a small line under it. Like she'd hesitated. Or underlined it quietly. I traced the mark with my thumb. My phone buzzed. A single message from her. "You fixed the table?" Just that. But it felt like a doorway opening. And I didn't know yet if I was supposed to walk through it. I didn't reply to her message right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust what pressing send would mean. So I just sat there, watching the 3 dots appear, then disappear, then return. She was typing. Stopping. Thinking. The same loop I was stuck in. Eventually I sent. "Yeah. It wasn't that hard." Her reply came almost instantly. "Good. It bothered me more than it should have." I stared at that line longer than necessary. More than it should have. She didn't talk like that. Mira was deliberate with her words, careful the way adults get when life has taught them that honesty sometimes backfires. I wasn't sure if she meant to be that open. But the weight of it lingered. Later that week, I found myself back at the cafe during her slower hour, the in-between time when the morning rush faded and the lunch crowd hadn't arrived. She was restocking tea packets, crouched slightly behind the counter. When she stood, she looked surprised to see me. You're early today, she said. I had time. She gave a small nod, as if she understood the parts one didn't say, that I'd made time. There were no other customers, so she brewed tea instead of making my usual latte. Earl Grey with a slice of citrus. I didn't even ask. She just set the cup in front of me. Try it, she said. You look like someone who could use something warm. I tried not to show how that one sentence hit deeper than it should. She sat across from me, something she never did. Just lowered herself into the chair like it was the most natural thing in the world, though I noticed the slight hesitation in her hands, the way she rubbed her thumb against her palm before resting them on the table. You okay? I asked. She answered by exhaling, not quite a sigh. Long morning? I waited. I'd learned she talked more if you didn't crowd the silence. My daughter called, she finally said. She's away for school. Still getting used to the distance. I blinked. I didn't even know she had a daughter. What did she call about? Nothing dramatic. Just, Mira shrugged. She's lonely. I said she'll be fine. I didn't tell her that I'm lonely too. Her eyes flicked up like she regretted saying the last part. I didn't push. I just sipped the tea she made, hot, fragrant, a little too sweet, and let the silence settle again, not heavy, just there. The cafe felt smaller. Or maybe it was just the way she looked at me, like she was searching for something she couldn't phrase yet. You remind me of someone, she said suddenly. Who? Myself. A long time ago. That shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. More than it should have. She reached over to steady the sugar jar, but her fingers brushed mine. Not an accident. Not deliberate either. Just a moment that unfolded and stayed. I didn't pull back. Her hand lingered a second too long. Soft. Warm. Not asking for anything, but saying something anyway. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't see Mira for 3 days. I told myself it didn't matter, that she probably switched shifts, or was taking a few mornings off. But the cafe felt different without her, like walking into a room where someone had just left and the air hadn't settled yet. On the 4th morning, she was back. She looked tired, but not in the physical way. More like she'd been thinking too much, the same way I did. You disappeared, I said before I could stop myself. She blinked slow. You noticed? I didn't answer. The silence filled in whatever truth I couldn't say. She gave a small smile, then looked down, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I switched shifts, she said. Just needed space. Space. That landed heavier than I expected. Something in her tone pulled back, like she was setting a quiet boundary either of us had named yet. She made my drink, tea again, not coffee, and handed it to me without the usual brush of fingers. Careful distance. Measured air. Before I could sit, the door opened and someone stepped in, a guy around my age. He lifted his hand. Hey, Mira. Her posture shifted. Not warmer. Just more guarded. Oh. Hi, she said, standing straighter. He glanced at me, then at her. Your daughter said to remind you about Sunday. Myra's jaw tightened the smallest bit. Right. Thanks. He left with a wave, not noticing the tension he'd dropped into the room. I stared at her. Who was that? A friend of my daughter, she said quickly. Too quickly. He helps out sometimes. Something in her voice tightened, like she didn't want to explain further. Like she didn't want me misreading anything. I looked at my cup. She'd forgotten to add the citrus slice. Mira never forgot. You okay? I asked. She didn't answer at first. Just breathed out slowly. Us talking like this, she said softly, eyes on the counter. Maybe I've let it feel too easy. Too easy? She nodded once. You're young. I'm older, I finished. Not a crime. She laughed under her breath, but there was no joy in it. It's not about crime. Then she finally looked at me, really looked, and the air between us tightened like a pulled thread. "I don't want to confuse you," she whispered. "I'm not confused. You should be." The silence after that felt alive, sharp around the edges. I stepped closer without planning to. She didn't move, didn't lean back. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, barely, a tiny, involuntary shift, but enough to pull something in me forward. "Mira," I said, and the word felt different in the quiet. Her breath caught. She didn't hide it. For one suspended second, a fraction, we weren't barista and customer, woman and younger man. Just two people standing too close to pretend it meant nothing. I leaned in a little. Not much. A question, not an answer. Her hand lifted, almost touching my arm, almost, then stopping midair. "We shouldn't," she said, voice low, trembling at the edges. But she didn't step away. And for the first time, it felt like the line between us wasn't solid. Just waiting for someone to cross. We closed the cafe together that evening. Not planned. Not spoken. I just stayed later than usual, and she didn't ask me to leave. She wiped the counter slower than normal, dragging the cloth in small circles, the kind people make when their thoughts are somewhere else entirely. Outside, the street was turning gold, that fragile hour when everything looks softer, even things that shouldn't. "Walk with me?" she asked without looking up. I nodded before she finished the question. We didn't go far. Just down the block, past the bookstore, to the bench near the corner. The one with peeling paint and a cracked slat. She sat with a small exhale, rubbing her hands together like they were cold, though the night wasn't. I sat beside her. Not too close. Not far enough. "You haven't asked?" she said after a long pause. "Asked what?" "Why I pulled back that day." Her fingers twisted together, a nervous habit I hadn't noticed before. "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." She gave a dry, quiet laugh. "You're a good person. You think waiting is patience, but sometimes it's fear." I looked at her. "I wasn't afraid." "You were," she said softer. "And so was I." Wind moved the leaves above us. A single car passed. The world kept making room for silence. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "My daughter's friend, the one who stopped by? He thought I was interested in you." She winced at her own words. "He made a comment. I brushed it off. But it stuck with me." "Why?" "Because it made something real that I've been pretending wasn't." She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Her voice already felt like skin with no armor. I swallowed. "Is that bad?" "It's dangerous." Another long pause. "For you," she added quietly. Jealousy prickled in my chest, sudden, unexpected. "Is it because of him? Your daughter's friend?" "What?" "No." Her head snapped up. "No. You think." "I don't know what to think." I cut in, sharper than intended. "1 minute you're close. The next you're gone." She stared at me, really stared. Something in her expression cracked open. "I didn't distance myself because of him," she said. "I did it because I care too much. And I don't know what to do with that." The confession hung there, raw, half-finished. My breath stilled. She looked away, biting her lower lip, a small, shaky gesture that told me more than any words she could have used. "You're young," she murmured. "You feel things intensely. And I." She trailed off, voice thinned by fear. "I don't want to hurt you." "You're not," I said, barely above a whisper. "I could." We were inches apart now, closer than we'd ever been without touching. I turned toward her. Slowly. Giving her every chance to pull back. She didn't. Her eyes fell to my mouth again. A soft, involuntary flicker. My heart kicked once hard. "Mira," I breathed. Her hand lifted, trembling, almost reaching my jaw, stopping just shy of it. Hovering. Wanting. "Tell me," she whispered, voice breaking like a question she couldn't finish. "What are we doing?" And the night held its breath with us. waiting for an answer either of us was ready to say aloud. The next morning, she wasn't at the cafe. At first I thought she was running late. Then I noticed the small sign taped to the register in her handwriting, neat, careful letters. Covering evening shifts this week. No explanation. No emoji. No smiley face she sometimes added when she was in a softer mood. Just a shift change. Just distance given a name. I ordered from the new guy, a kid barely older than me, too cheerful, too unaware of the empty space behind the counter. He didn't know my order like she did. Didn't glance twice. Didn't write my name on the cup. I sat at my usual table and tried to drink the coffee, but it tasted wrong. Bitter in a way that had nothing to do with the beans. For 3 days I came during the morning hours, and for 3 days the seat by the counter stayed empty. The stool she normally rested her hand on. The place she would lean, just slightly, when talking to me. Gone. I told myself not to be dramatic. That adults change schedules all the time. That nothing had actually happened between us, not really. But the silence between two people can be louder than anything spoken. On the 4th evening, I finally came during her news shift. She saw me the second I walked in, and something in her posture stiffened. Not rejection. More like bracing. "You're here late," she said, too neutral. "You switched shifts." I needed to. I waited for her to say more. She didn't. When she handed me my drink, her fingers didn't touch mine. Not even by accident. She kept her eyes on the cup, not on me. "Mira, did I do something?" Her breath caught. I heard it, even as she tried to mask it by turning away. "No," she said. "You didn't. But something's different." She hesitated. Then, "My ex called," she said quietly. "About our daughter. He's back in the picture a little. Not in my life, just..." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." But it did. It explained the shift in her eyes that night on the bench. The guilt she tried to hide. "I can handle that," I said softly. "I can't." She said it fast, like the words were escaping. Her shoulders tightened. "You make me forget how complicated my life is. And that feels good until it feels dangerous." I swallowed the ache rising in my chest. "For who?" "For both of us." The cafe door chimed as someone walked in, and she stepped back, retreating to the safety of routine. She wiped the counter even though it was already clean. Didn't look at me again. I sat at my table, watched her avoid my gaze like avoiding a cliff edge. My phone buzzed once, a message from her. I opened it. I shouldn't blur lines. "I'm sorry." I typed a reply. "We didn't do anything wrong." My thumb hovered over the send button. Then froze. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I locked my phone. And left the message unsent. I spent 2 days pretending her message didn't sit in my pocket like a stone. 2 days convincing myself to move on. 2 days failing at it. On the 3rd night, I found myself walking, no destination, no plan, just following the kind of pull you only admit to when you're tired of lying to yourself. I ended up outside her building. Her apartment windows glowed a soft yellow. Not bright. Not inviting. Just lived in. I stood there, hands in my pockets, rehearsing every version of Go Home, and ignoring all of them. Then the door opened. She stepped out with a bag of trash, hair tied loosely, sweater sleeves pushed up. She looked startled when she saw me, not angry, not upset. Just surprised in a way that softened her entire face. "You shouldn't be here," she said gently. "I know." A long, fragile pause. She didn't go back inside. I didn't leave. "What do you need?" she asked, voice quiet, steady. I let out a breath I'd been carrying for days. "To stop pretending I don't think about you." Her jaw tightened, not in rejection, just in the effort of holding something back. She set the trash bag down carefully, wiping her palms on her sweater like she suddenly didn't know what to do with her hands. "You got my message," she said. "I did." Another breath. I didn't reply. I noticed. Her gaze shifted toward the ground, and her voice lowered. I meant what I said. I'm not in a place for anything messy. My life is already complicated, I finished. She nodded. Yes. But you're here, I said. Talking to me. Not leaving. I stepped closer, slow. So something's pulling you too. Her lips parted, a breath caught in her chest. She didn't deny it. Mira, I said softer. You don't have to protect me from what I feel. She looked up at me then, really looked, and I saw the cost of all her careful distance. The exhaustion of wanting something she kept telling herself she shouldn't want. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of me? Of myself. Her voice almost broke. Of wanting something I'm not supposed to want. I swallowed. Is it really about age? She hesitated. It's about risk. The kind people take when they already know how loss feels. We stood inches apart, streetlight catching in her eyes. A quiet world. No audience. No big declarations. Just two people who'd been circling the truth for too long. I lifted a hand, slowly, giving her room, and rested it against the doorframe beside her head, not touching her, just close enough for her to feel the question. If you tell me to go, I said, I will. Her breath trembled. Her fingers curled slightly, like resisting the urge to reach for me. I don't want you to go, she said finally. Barely a whisper. Barely a confession. But the truest thing she'd given me. I stepped back half an inch, enough for her to choose. She looked at my face, then at my hand, then at her own, like she was fighting every instinct she'd spent weeks burying. Then, small, tentative, she touched my wrist. Just that. But it felt like her entire wall dropping an inch. Okay, she breathed. And the night felt different after that. Not resolved, not simple. But human, and finally honest. Time didn't fix everything. It just softened the edges. A few weeks passed after that night, the one where everything finally cracked open between them. Not in a dramatic way, just enough for the truth to spill out, quietly, like water slipping over the rim of a glass. Since then, their routine didn't snap back immediately. It settled into something looser, gentler. They still met at the bench sometimes, not always at 8:47 a.m. anymore. Some mornings she arrived early, nursing her tea with both hands like it steadied her. Some days he showed up late, holding his black coffee, looking like he'd run through every possible version of the conversation before getting there. Either of them said, "We're okay." They just were. He started walking her home on Thursdays. She didn't ask him to, and he didn't point it out. It simply happened, the way small habits form when two people finally stop pretending they don't care. She would talk about her day, her voice softer than before, less guarded. He listened with a focus that almost felt like apology. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. Silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was something shared. The shift was small but undeniable. She leaned closer when she laughed. He stopped checking his phone whenever she paused mid-sentence. She remembered the way he took his coffee now. He started keeping a spare umbrella in case she forgot hers again. Life didn't become perfect. She still had days when she pulled back. He still had moments where old fear flickered behind his eyes. But they didn't stay stuck in those moments. They simply waited for the other to find their footing again. One evening, after a long day, she found him sitting on the bench alone. It wasn't morning this time. It wasn't 8:47. The light was soft, the kind that makes everything look a little more honest. She sat beside him without a word. He glanced at her, then back at the ground. "I thought you weren't coming," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she replied. "But I'm here." That was enough. It always had been. They didn't talk about the future. They didn't define anything. They didn't need to. The peace between them wasn't loud or sweeping. It was earned through hesitation, through pulling away, through coming back anyway. Eventually she leaned her head on his shoulder. Slowly, carefully, he exhaled. His hand brushed hers, not a grand gesture, just a small, human one. A choice. They stayed like that as the sky dimmed, the world softening around them. She whispered, almost to herself, "It's strange, how quiet it feels. Like everything finally stopped rushing." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe it was supposed to," he said. And for the first time, either of them questioned it. Later, when they finally stood to leave, they shared a small look, the kind only two people who have been through the same unspoken storm can understand. A quiet understanding passed between them. A reflection only they would ever know. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?